It was the kind of day that felt like the calm before a storm. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, known for her bold, firebrand style, stood confidently on the steps of Capitol Hill. She had spent the last few years gaining more and more influence, never shy to make waves. Her rallies were packed, her speeches fiery, and the media loved her. But deep down, even she couldn't deny that something felt different this time. The air was charged. Something was coming for her, something bigger than the usual Twitter spats or partisan squabbles. She didn't know it yet, but this moment, right now, was when everything was about to change. Inside her office, her advisors were already on edge. They were trying to get ahead of the story that had just broken, a bombshell from none other than Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, both of whom were on the rise again, stirring up trouble for her in ways no one had expected. "Alex, this isn't just another attack," one of her aides said urgently, standing at her door. "You need to listen to this." AOC glanced at the phone in her hand, noting the news alerts flooding in. There was a new report that Trump, with the backing of Vance, had uncovered evidence that could completely dismantle her political career. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to fall into place, and it wasn't looking good. "Trump?" AOC muttered, a smirk briefly flickering on her lips. "He's been gone for too long. Does he really think he can take me down now?" Her aide didn't look convinced. "This isn't just about Trump, Alexandria. Vance is in on this too. They've been working together on this for weeks." Suddenly, AOC felt the weight of the situation hit her. The trap was set. And for once, it wasn't something she could simply talk her way out of. The moment the video dropped, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez knew it was bad. She hadn't expected the immediate tidal wave of backlash, the kind of viral destruction that spread like wildfire across every news platform and social media site. The video, titled "The Truth About AOC, Trump and Vance Expose the Lies," was everywhere. It had been carefully edited, sharp and precise, cutting through the narrative AOC had built over the years. It wasn't just about politics, this was personal. In the footage, J.D. Vance, sitting next to Trump at a press conference, laid out a scathing case. "We've known for a long time, folks, that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was hiding the truth about her finances. But now we have the proof." Vance's voice was calm, almost chilling, as he read off a series of financial records, linking AOC to questionable investments and funding sources that she had claimed were transparent. The accusations were damning, suggesting that she had misled her supporters and used her position to secure personal financial gain. Trump, with his signature smirk, chimed in. "They said they wanted to drain the swamp. Well, looks like AOC was swimming in it the whole time. We've got the receipts now." The video cut to clips of Ocasio-Cortez during her most intense moments in Congress, passionately speaking against corruption, while Vance and Trump contrasted these clips with the new evidence. The contradiction was stark. AOC, for all her rhetoric about fighting the system, had built her political career while allegedly participating in the very corrupt practices she railed against. Within hours, the video went viral. Every news outlet was covering it. Her social media feeds exploded with criticism from both sides of the aisle. Even some of her staunchest supporters began to question her. AOC's phone was blowing up. She couldn't escape the rapid onslaught of calls from both her team and her closest allies, scrambling to come up with damage control strategies. But it was too late. She had been cornered, and the spotlight was no longer on her message, it was on her own contradictions. "Where are we with the counter-response?" AOC asked sharply, her calm demeanor beginning to crack. One of her aides hesitated. "We're working on it, Alexandria. But this is different. Trump and Vance have got the narrative now." She slammed her hand down on the desk, her voice low but fierce. "Then we fight back. We don't let them control this. We expose them." But deep down, even as she shouted orders to her staff, AOC could feel it, the walls closing in. This wasn't just another scandal. This was the beginning of the end. As the days passed, the situation only grew worse for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. The video had sparked a political firestorm, and the damage was far beyond anything she had imagined. What had started as a targeted attack from Trump and Vance had evolved into a full-fledged media war, one where she was suddenly fighting for her political life. By the time she arrived at Capitol Hill that morning, reporters were waiting for her outside. Cameras flashed as she stepped out of her car, but she could feel the weight of the questions hanging in the air. There was no escaping it now. Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, what do you say about the allegations made by Trump and Vance regarding your financial dealings? A reporter shouted, jostling to get closer. AOC paused, her gaze scanning the crowd of reporters. She had dealt with hostile questions before, but this felt different. There was a tension in the air, people weren't just curious, they were eager for her downfall. She forced a smile. The video you've seen is a distortion of the truth. A carefully crafted piece of propaganda designed to mislead the American people. But even as she spoke, her voice lacked the usual conviction. She could see the doubt in their eyes, in the way they watched her every word, as if waiting for her to slip. Her staff hurried her inside, but the damage was already done. Her supporters were divided, some standing by her, others beginning to waver. The cracks were showing, and it was only a matter of time before they spread wide enough to swallow her whole. Inside her office, her team was in full crisis mode. Emergency meetings were held every few hours. There was talk of calling in high-powered PR teams and legal experts to figure out how to handle the situation, but Ocasio-Cortez was growing frustrated. She knew this wasn't just about spinning the truth, it was about survival. We need a way to fight back. Hard, she said, slamming her hand on the desk once again. This isn't just a scandal. They're trying to end me. And if we don't go on the offensive, we're done. Her senior advisor, exhausted from the constant barrage of calls, looked up at her. Alex, there's no easy way out of this. Trump and Vance have the momentum. Their narrative is dominating. The more you try to fight it, the worse it's going to get. AOC stood up, pacing the room. Then we expose their lies. We make them the targets. We show the American people that they're the real threat to democracy, not me. But even as she spoke the words, she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that time was running out. Trump and Vance weren't just attacking her, they were dismantling the very foundation of her career. The narrative they had created was already taking root in the minds of the public, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. The pressure was mounting, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez knew that if she didn't act fast, she would lose everything. The narrative Trump and Vance had crafted was gaining traction, and her attempts at damage control were falling flat. It was time to turn the tide, but she needed to be strategic. Her first move was to take the fight directly to Trump. In a fiery press conference, AOC stood in front of the cameras with an air of defiance that she hadn't shown in days. The room was packed, the tension palpable. I've seen the video, she began, her voice steady, but tinged with a simmering anger. It's a compilation of half-truths and outright lies. And I'll tell you right now, this isn't about me. This is about Trump's desperation to distract from his own failures. This is about J.D. Vance's political maneuvering, hoping that by throwing mud at me, he can get ahead in the polls. The room was silent. AOC had always been known for her sharp rhetoric, but today, she was firing on all cylinders. She laid out her case, piece by piece, dismantling each accusation with a combination of logic and blistering criticism. You want to talk about corruption? Let's talk about Trump's shady business dealings. Let's talk about Vance, who's been nothing but a pawn for the far-right agenda. These two have more skeletons in their closets than I've ever had. Her words cut deep, and for a moment, it seemed as though the narrative might shift. The media picked up on her sharp retorts, and soon, her supporters were rallying behind her once again. She was fighting back, showing the world that she wasn't going to just roll over. But the fight was far from over. The backlash from the Trump camp came swiftly. His spokesperson, within hours, hit back with a vengeance, calling AOC's defense laughable and completely dishonest. A new round of attacks, more personalized and cutting, began flooding the airwaves. AOC wasn't just being accused of financial misconduct anymore, the media was now painting her as a hypocrite, someone who had taken advantage of her platform for personal gain, all while claiming to be a voice for the people. Her phone rang constantly, messages and calls pouring in from every corner of the political spectrum. Some of her allies urged her to keep up the fight, while others were already preparing for the worst, whispering about what might happen if this all came crashing down. But Ocasio-Cortez wasn't ready to back down. The fight for her political future had just begun. She had to keep pushing, keep swinging, or risk losing everything. The stakes were now higher than ever. And she knew that if she didn't come out on top of this, she'd be nothing more than a footnote in history. The days that followed the press conference felt like an unending blur. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had done everything in her power to fight back, but with each passing hour, the pressure only grew. The media landscape was dominated by Trump and Vance, and their attacks were relentless. But there was something else, a shift in the tone of the battle. The public wasn't just watching anymore. They were beginning to question everything. AOC had expected this, of course. It was a dirty game. But she hadn't anticipated how quickly her own allies would start to distance themselves. The first signs came in the form of a few key endorsements that had disappeared overnight. Prominent activists who had once sung her praises were now cautious, offering non-committal statements, hesitant to back her fully. In Washington, whispers started to grow louder. Some of her colleagues in Congress, once staunch supporters, now began to make subtle comments behind closed doors. A few were already positioning themselves for what seemed like a looming power vacuum. The reality was setting in, even her most loyal followers weren't sure if she could survive this storm. AOC sat at her desk late one night, staring at the documents in front of her. The weight of the situation was sinking in, and she could feel the tight grip of panic rising in her chest. There were calls for investigations into her finances, whispers about her campaign funding, and suddenly, everything she had built was under a magnifying glass. Her phone rang. It was a message from her closest ally in the media, someone she trusted. It was a short, to-the-point message: "You need to watch the new interview with Vance. It's over. You don't have much time left." A cold shiver ran down her spine as she clicked on the link. The video played automatically. J.D. Vance, sitting smugly across from a primetime host, laid out his final salvo against her. "They're asking the wrong questions," Vance said, his voice smooth and deliberate. "It's not about her financials anymore. It's about who she really represents." Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez may say she's fighting for the people, but who has she been working with behind closed doors? The left-wing elite who have been exploiting this country for years. The segment cut to footage of AOC at fundraising events, shaking hands with powerful donors and influential figures from the corporate world. Vance's words were chilling: "Do you think she's one of us? Or is she just another cog in the machine, playing a part to secure her own power? The people deserve to know." As the interview played out, AOC's worst fears began to materialize. The narrative was no longer about a single scandal, it was about her entire political persona. The world wasn't just watching her fight for survival. They were watching her crumble, and with every passing second, the grip of her opponents tightened. The phone rang again. It was her team. "Alex, we need to talk. This isn't just about damage control anymore. You need to decide where you go from here. Fast." AOC stared at the screen, her heart racing. She had built her career on fighting the system, on being the voice of the people. But now, it seemed the system was turning against her. She knew what she had to do. The weight of it all finally hit Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She had been through scandal and controversy before, but this was different. The walls had closed in, and there was nowhere to run. Her career, her reputation, everything was at risk. In her office, surrounded by her closest advisors, AOC sat in silence. The television in the corner of the room blared the latest updates, polls showing her approval plummeting, her financial records being scrutinized in ways she never imagined. The attacks from Trump and Vance had gained so much momentum that even some of her most devoted supporters were starting to waver. Her social media presence, once a weapon, had become a battleground, filled with trolls and allies alike questioning her every move. "Alex, we need a new strategy. We can't keep playing defense," one of her senior advisors said, breaking the silence. He had been with her from the beginning, but even he looked tired now. His face, usually calm and composed, was showing signs of stress. AOC stood up, pacing back and forth. "What do you want me to do? They've already painted me as the villain. If I don't go on the offensive now, it's over." Her advisor sighed. "I'm not saying to go after them, though maybe that's an option, but we need to regain control of the narrative. Right now, it's all about them. Trump and Vance are everywhere, and you're just reacting. You need to make them react to you." AOC stopped pacing, her eyes narrowing. "What if we turn the tables? What if we expose them for what they really are? I've been the target of their lies for too long. It's time to make them the villains." There was a flicker of something in her eyes, determination, but also desperation. She knew she was running out of time. She had one shot left. Within hours, AOC's team was crafting a blistering response, one that would take the fight directly to Trump and Vance. It wasn't just about financial records anymore, it was personal. She had to make the world see that the real corruption wasn't in her. It was in the establishment they represented. The game was changing, and she had to use every tool at her disposal. The next morning, in front of the Capitol steps, AOC addressed the media. She was no longer the woman on the defensive. Her posture was different, stronger. The fire in her voice was unmistakable. "Let's be clear," she began, her voice cutting through the noise. "What you've seen over the past week isn't about transparency. It's about silencing the truth. The truth is, Donald Trump and J.D. Vance are scared. They're scared because they know the people are waking up to the fact that their version of politics, theirs and the entire corporate establishment they represent, is the real threat to democracy." The cameras flashed as she spoke, but AOC barely flinched. She continued, her tone sharp and unwavering. "They've tried to tear me down, but they're not fighting me, they're fighting the future. They're fighting the voices of the people who have been ignored for too long. They're fighting the very idea of change. But I'm not going anywhere. And they know it." Her words were a direct hit, and the media immediately took notice. For the first time in days, the narrative began to shift. The public wasn't just focused on her financial dealings anymore, they were listening to what she had to say. The fight for the future of American democracy had just become the focus of her message. But AOC knew this was only the beginning. Her response had sent shockwaves, but Trump and Vance weren't going to back down. The battle was far from over. They would hit back, harder than before. The stakes were too high for them to let her take control of the narrative now. She had made her move. The question was, could she hold her ground, or was this the beginning of the end? As the days stretched on, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez felt the intensity of the political storm she was in. Her counterattack had resonated with many of her supporters, and for the first time in weeks, she felt a glimmer of hope. The media was buzzing, but it wasn't just about the attacks anymore. Now, the focus had shifted to the battle between the establishment and those who wanted change. But just as she thought she might gain some ground, Trump and J.D. Vance doubled down. In an explosive new rally, Trump returned to his old stomping grounds, surrounded by adoring crowds. His words echoed with venom, pointing the finger squarely at AOC and anyone who dared to challenge the status quo. "I told you this woman wasn't who she said she was," Trump shouted to the roaring crowd. "She's in bed with the same elites she claims to fight against. This is the face of the swamp, the very corruption she promised to drain. And the people are waking up to it. Vance, beside him, chimed in. This is about the future of America. We cannot let these radicals take control of our country. AOC is the embodiment of everything wrong with Washington, and it's time for her to go. The attacks were relentless, but this time, something had changed. The public was beginning to see the two men as desperate, as if they were clutching at straws to protect their crumbling hold on power. AOC's message was clear now, and it resonated with millions. That evening, a bombshell report surfaced. Investigative journalists had uncovered ties between Trump's financial dealings and some of the same corporate interests that had funded Vance's rise. The media couldn't ignore it. The hypocrisy was undeniable. In a final, furious response, AOC released a video addressing the nation. She stood, looking directly into the camera, her expression resolute. Donald Trump and J.D. Vance are scared, she began. They're scared because they know the truth is coming. For years, they've played the same game, using lies, manipulation, and fear to keep control. But we are done with that. This is not their country anymore. This is the people's country. She went on, her voice rising with passion. I've been called many things. A liar, a hypocrite, a radical. But what I've never been is part of the system that seeks to destroy everyday Americans. I've fought for you, and I will continue to fight for you. Her words hit like a hammer, and for the first time in weeks, her phone began to light up with messages of support from both sides of the aisle. It was a turning point. AOC had shown that she was not just a politician trying to protect her career, she was a symbol of something much larger, something that resonated deeply with the American people. The fight wasn't about her, it was about the future of the nation. Trump and Vance didn't back down, they couldn't. But as their attacks grew more desperate, their influence began to wane. The truth was out, and the American public wasn't fooled anymore. The following week, AOC's approval ratings began to rise once more. She had survived the storm, not by yielding, but by confronting it head-on. And while the battle was far from over, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had proven one thing to herself and to the world: she wasn't finished yet.